Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam.
And your other co-host, Alan.
Hello, Alan. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, just a standard old couple of weeks since the last recording for me. How about you?
Yeah, it's not been too bad. A little bit busy at work, but I'm off for a couple of weeks now, so a bit of a rest.
Well, that's very nice.
Yeah, so
Okay, so this podcast we're talking about Azure Security Center. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort of talk through the product, what the sort of features that it has inbuilt into it, and also we're going to dive into sort of how we use it on a day-to-day basis, and some more information about licensing and how you can get started using the product. Um, so so Al, Azure Security Center, what is it?
yeah, so it's a unified infrastructure security management system. So in effect, it looks after um, checking instances within Azure and on-premise for threats and misconfiguration.
Right. Okay. So it's sort of a big brother for any assets that you might have in Azure that it supports.
Yep, and it can be on-premise as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so what does it actually cover?
So it covers virtual machines, servers, scale sets, cloud services, and app services.
Wow, so it is pretty far-reaching there.
Yeah, and it's always improving every week, every month, as all the security stuff in Microsoft does. So all new threats and things like that.
Yeah, I must admit, the list on the left-hand side in Security Center is getting longer and longer every single time I click back into it. It just seems like they manage to put in new features, all the time. So when we're talking about sort of virtual machines and servers, are we sort of looking at the configuration of the servers, or is this, in process monitoring of what's happening on those servers?
So there's probably two parts to it. So if we kind of, I guess, look at what I use it for
Yeah.
more
Okay.
than anything.
Yeah.
So we can, so as part of some of the licensing for it, which we'll go into later, it gives you Microsoft Defender ATP for servers or for the virtual machines.
Okay.
And I think it also gives you the ATP for data as well, which is a new one for SQL, looking for threats in that. But it also allows you to be able to grab the process logs, the events, and everything from that virtual machine or service and bring them into a log analytics where you can query it, or you can use something like Sentinel to then sit on top of it to check the data for threats.
Right. Okay. So you're primarily using it for log and event management, and also, trying to look at those data events and those data security, well, potential security incidents.
Yeah, absolutely. It's mainly around bringing it into Sentinel and using some of the workbooks in there to display the same data in this the single pane of glass kind of thing.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
but yeah, I know there's other parts to it, and we do use that sometimes. But mainly for my sort of role, it's sort of the other side of it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Got it. So yeah. So from my perspective as well, so it's interesting, security center, because it's kind of it spans multiple different specialities, really, doesn't it? It's sort of I think it touches on all aspects of Azure, if you see what I mean, because it's quite a weird product in the fact that me and you both see value from it. Does that make sense? Because it's sort of it's more about general security, like, of those servers. I mean, for me, from a virtual machine and a server aspect, once you've installed the agent itself, it can actually give you recommendations on the security of those machines. I'll give you a really simple example. Let's say that you allow root login over SSH, and potentially you don't want that on a Linux machine. Then it will flag that. And Microsoft have a set of baseline security. I'm not sure what they actually call them, but sort of compliance rules. I'm not sure what the
It probably is security baselines
yeah, and
for those type of machines. Yeah.
exactly, and what the great thing with that is that because some of those recommendations are quite quantitative, like as in um, sort of root access over SSH, for instance, might be deemed as from a compliance perspective something that can never happen. It can actually give you recommendations, and off of that, it can give you a security score. So it's quite nice to be able to apply Security Center to maybe an existing server or piece of infrastructure that you maybe don't have. Um, maybe you're taking it over, and it's I've recently moved a client. Um, I took over a client's, virtual machine, and I had no idea what the configuration of that machine was. So Security Center allowed me to, just run a baseline across that before I even, start, scoping out what needs to be done. And it can give me some really good recommendations, just off the bat, and things I might have, if I'd manually gone to check all of those, those different areas, I might have missed some of those. And obviously, as time progresses and security standards change, obviously it's in Microsoft's best interest to keep these changes rolling out to us, so we get that improvement, that it's not necessarily our quotes job to keep these systems up to date, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the examples you gave to me in the past was that you installed I don't know if it was Docker or something like that, but something got installed and there were some extra services that were enabled because of it that you didn't need.
Yeah,
And Security Center picked that up and said, well, you don't need this. So
yeah.
you might as well turn it off.
I can't remember what the exact configuration. It was definitely something to do with Docker, and it was
Was it something to do
it.
with Cube? It wasn't Kubernetes, was it?
No, it was definitely Docker. I think it was like I can't exactly remember. It's something to do with um how you connect to it, or something like that. It was basically a configuration that I had never even considered before, because on one of my dev boxes, I've just got it's like a staging environment. It's got Docker on it just to run up an application really quickly, and it was part of the it was added to a subscription that was covered under the security center, so it was giving me sort of the alerts for this staging environment. And yeah, it was basically telling me that the baseline, and all it was is just like an Ubuntu box with Docker just installed onto it. It had no configuration. It wasn't, it was all sanitized data. It was a staging environment that was, only due to be up for a short period of time. So it wasn't really, we didn't have to provision the server and do all the hardening and everything that we'd usually do. But it gave me, it said, sort of, "Oi, come and have a look at this, because this isn't configured right." And it is amazing the um, the amount of checks and rules that they've got in place
Yeah,
that
because it
maybe you would
looks.
just completely, miss.
Yeah, I was just about to say that I think it looks for misconfiguration as well, doesn't it? So
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
from a security perspective, anyway,
Yeah.
oh, you've got this port open. Do you need it?
Correct. Yeah, and I think it's also good to stress, just to sort of zoom out from that scenario as well. It's not also just looking at the virtual machine; it's also looking at like your network security groups and all of the other various aspects of running a virtual machine inside of inside of Azure. Like for instance, some of the rules are around you have non-web traffic ports open to the world, right? So let's say your SSH port on a Linux box is open to the internet, and potentially you might not want that to be open to the internet. So it's going to alert you, and it's going to say, here's the recommendation, you know do with it whatever you want. So I think from that perspective, and for me as somebody that sometimes works alone on projects, having something checking what I'm doing automatically for me, and I'm getting recommendations from experts at Microsoft. I mean, that can only be a good thing for the relatively small amount of money that Azure Security Center costs, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it helps you to validate against with your customers that it's at a reasonable hardening as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So it's the thing is, unless you go through some clients are so small that they just don't have the resources to go through a massive security audit and hardening and, penetration testing and things like that. And, you know, if we just talk outside the Microsoft world for a minute, there's tons of virtual machines that people just buy and stick apps on those boxes, and they have no idea what the configuration on them are. It's all of those things, and Security Center allows me especially just to run. It's not the be all and end all. I still have to go in and check things manually myself. I have to obviously check that my application code and logic is secure, but it's just great to know that I've got some experts looking at these assets. I mean, not I don't really tend to spend a lot of time configuring virtual machines and bare metal servers, because in my world now a lot of it is SaaS. It's all pass products. It's not because the ops cost of keeping a virtual machine up and running is just so high nowadays that even though Microsoft have sort of broken down the barriers of the cost versus dedicated servers, somebody's still got to manage it, right? Like, somebody would still have to pay me to go and check that server, make sure the configuration is correct and all of those things. Whereas now I'm constantly moving towards you know um like a pass, or even a SaaS offering, like a function app or a logic app, or some hybrid of the two, because we don't have to worry so much about the configuration of the base machines, because we're just running on Microsoft's platform, right? um
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said earlier, that it does also cover the cloud services and app services as well. So even though it's not necessarily the bare metal, the OS you're looking after, but the
yeah.
the web service configuration, what ports you got open, like you said.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, just to talk about, say, let's say you made a function app, or I'm guessing it also covers logic apps. That it will tell you if you can access your function app over HTTP versus HTTPS, right? Because you can potentially set that yourself. So it will give you recommendations across a huge gamut of Azure services, and that's what I really love about it. And the simplicity of the compliance and scoring, right? Because if you take a compliance standard that maybe you're trying to hit, like, let's say you were trying to hit PCI compliance, right, which is arguably one of the hardest standards to actually hit. um PCI compliance isn't just about technical configuration, right? Like, that's part of it, but it's there's a huge amount around business processes and data privacy and data retention and all of those myriad of different things. Um, but what Security Sync can do is it gives you an overall, security percentage and point score and all of that sort of stuff. But you can compare your scores and your compliance against regulatory compliance standards. So you could say, right, of the technical requirements that I need to meet to reach PCI compliance. And again, that's not going to get you to PCI compliance. That's just going to get your technical, your technical part way there. Um, it's going to say, you should do X. We recommend you do X, Y, and Z because we believe you're missing this. Um, and I think that can only be a good thing. Helping developers, system administrators, consultants, to understand those requirements more and automatically check for them.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just thinking about the like ISO 27001 around permissions to what access you need and things like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
because you can obviously, this doesn't just talk about the vulnerabilities or the misconfigurations within the application. It's about access to that application as well.
Yeah,
Can everyone on the Azure AD tenant access it, or everyone in the
correct.
subscription? Can you lock it down to the resource group or to the app? That
Yeah,
all the RBAC stuff.
yeah. So I'll just I've got a security Center subscription open now, and I'll just give you some ideas of the different notifications that you can get. So, for instance, even at the subscription level, there's a recommendation which says there should be more than one owner assigned to your subscription. Right. So it can just be simple things like that you might just think, you might just be like, okay, I've got a subscription and, I'm the only owner of it. Just create it and move on, right? Because subscriptions, a pretty quick thing to get up and running, isn't it? And you might just miss that configuration. And also, for instance, it's one of in this staging environment, it's telling me that one of my assets doesn't have ATP enabled on it, and it's saying like that's a quick fix just to install the agent on that machine and get ATP enabled on it. So it's just things that you probably wouldn't miss it in a production environment because you would sit there and you would go and check yourself. But again, I think me and Al, we've been talking about this for a long time about how you actually, it's one thing to configure, an asset or a service, but how do you know that it's actually configured correctly, right? And how do you know that in 3 months' time somebody doesn't uninstall the client, or that doesn't happen, but you can never be 100% sure, can you? Um,
Well,
y-
it's in if you think about if you did an upgrade on a server, like we were talking about that Docker one, if
yeah,
you did an upgrade on Docker, maybe it would reinstall that service. You wouldn't know about it, or
yeah,
opens up ports that you didn't know about.
correct. Yeah, yeah, and that's completely right. When you go through your patching cycles, like you say, you have no idea. Well, you do have an idea, obviously, of what you're upgrading and patching, but you can't go through line by line and work out what exact difference there is in an application, right? And I think that is, you know, for me, that's really important as somebody that's independent and advising people. You can get a really good security baseline, implement relatively quickly, implement configuration. I mean, in terms of configuration, this is just going to do recommendations for you. You have to actually go and, pull the levers and everything like that yourself. Um, for stuff that's outside of the Azure portal anyway. But again, it's just pointing you in the right direction, saying, "Hey Sam, just to let you know, you've only got one owner on your subscription. Maybe you should add a second." You know, and you're not going to be able to get away from that because it's going to show in your score, and it's going to be alerted to you all the time. So yeah, so okay, sorry, go on now.
No, I was just going to say that we've kind of talked about setting it up and stuff like that, but we haven't really said we said about the agent and things like that. But if it's a virtual machine, a VM in Azure, it's
Yeah,
literally a push button, enable this on this VM, and it
y-
does it within the Azure portal. There's no
yes, it does. Yeah, yeah,
install that you have to do. It's all done via the Azure backend services for that VM,
yeah,
be it Windows, Linux, etc.
yeah.
Um,
Do they support every sort of flavor of Linux? I've only done it like on Ubuntu boxes, but I'm assuming that the agents got installers for Red Hat and all the other various versions of Linux that you can run on Azure.
off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but
Okay,
I would. It
yeah,
wouldn't surprise. It would not surprise me that it's covered. It covers everything that they've got in obviously their stack.
yeah,
Um,
the official Microsoft
yeah.
sort of virtual machines. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a little bit. So I know in these podcasts we do try to keep things. The idea of these is just to talk about the topic that we're talking about, and obviously there's so much I want to go into, like really detailed stuff, because I'd really like to go through like each of the areas and talk about them in depth. But I think the main thing for me is just to put a spotlight on a security center in this podcast, and give you some high level, this is what it can do. You guys should go and and have a play with this yourself, right? Because until you actually play with it, you won't really realize how you can best utilize it for your specific scenario, because everybody's different, right? um, so um, if somebody is going to try Security Center, what's the licensing costs?
So I think there's two tiers. There's a free tier, and then there's the standard tier. I think previously there may have been other tiers, but I think they've cut it down a little bit now. Um, so I think the main ones for virtual machines, at least, the standard tier gives you the Defender ATP and the Data ATP, I think it's called, for the SQL, like I briefly mentioned earlier. Um, so that gives you the that sort of stuff. So that's just kind of giving you a license for that, because you can buy Defender separately now in a separate license for servers, but it's covered also in the Azure Security Center. So it's kind of like a value add, I guess.
Yeah.
So
One really big difference for me for free versus standard is just in time virtual machine access. Because I think that for me is a really powerful tool to enable access to servers. Do you want to just take us through what just in time virtual machine access is?
yeah, so just in time virtual access or access to virtual machines is where um, if it's a Windows box or a Linux box and you've got SSH or RDP access, instead of leaving it on all the time and you having to go in and add it to the network security group to allow you to have access to it, it allows you to, in effect, say, I need access for 3 hours from my IP address, wherever you are, and it will just put that rule in temporarily for those 3 hours and then remove it. So it's very easy to only expose those ports, one, to the IP address you're currently on, but two, for the only short amount of time, and not leaving it open, so that if your machine gets compromised, they don't have direct access to that application or virtual machine.
Yeah, and I think as well is there's an audit trail there. Yeah, so you've actually made a request, so you can pinpoint it down to, let's say you had a security incident where you had a bad actor in your organization. I'm guessing, touch wood, that's never going to happen. But you could see, who had access, at what time to those servers, in terms of remote access, and that might not just be for RDP or SSH. It might be that you've got some sort of piece of software running on that, let's say you had a Plesk or cPanel or something like that running on there. You can block off all those ports as well at the same time. So yeah, really like just-in-time virtual machine access. Really, really good. Um,
So just going through
yeah, go on.
the free tier, it's mainly the Azure Secure Score and the continuous assessment and security recommendations. So just turning it on and seeing what's happening and how good or bad something a service looks like. For the standard tier, like you said, it is just in time access, Microsoft Defender for servers, threat protection for PaaS services. So they're bringing all that in now. And the regulatory compliance dashboards and reports
Yeah,
is the part of that. So you have to go up
yeah.
to the standard tier for that.
And I mean, if there's anybody listening that hasn't gone and looked at that compliance dashboards and reports, um, the wealth of information that is in there is quite outstanding because even requirements, compliance, regulatory compliance requirements that aren't, technical are still in there. So it gives you a really good understanding of, what full PCI compliance, to whatever level is in there, um, looks like, and the steps that you're going to have to go through if you want to get to that level, before you have a true, audit, for that. Okay, so that's sort of licensing. So basically, the TLDR of licensing is there's a free tier which will give you value anyway because it's going to give you some security recommendations and it's going to give you a secure score. But there is some really tangible benefits to going to going up to a standard tier, and also just to also reiterate that you pay per um, resource, inside that subscription, right?
Yeah, and it's looks like it's per hour as well. I thought it was a monthly cost, but it's actually for virtual machines, it's point 0.0 well, not no, sorry, 1.5p per hour for it running. I think it's the same for app services as well. Um, but one thing I was just about to say was that obviously with the standard tier, so if you're ingesting logs into log analytics, there's obviously an ingestion cost there. Um, but with the standard tier of Azure Security Center, you get 500 megabytes of data per day of ingestion. So that kind of comes off it. So if you're doing, if you're ingesting that data into the log analytics, you're kind of um, negating that cost a little bit if you're using the two of them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there's a potential cost saving there if you're already doing that ingestion.
Yeah, with obviously a huge benefit to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Okay, that's also so. What is We've mentioned it a couple of times, but what is the secure score? What does that sort of give us?
So that gives you an indication of how good your service or your subscription is, and what out of all the changes you need and things like that. So it gives you points or percentage, like you said earlier.
Yeah, yeah. So there's an overall percentage, and then you see because different subscriptions are going to have different points totals, right? So for instance, in front of me I've got two subscriptions, and one has a maximum of 14 points because it's got a certain number of services and assets in it, and the other one has a maximum of 23 points, right? Because it's got more assets that are being covered, and well, sorry, resources that are being covered. So the percentage now gives us a really good indication of generally how those resources are doing security wise. And I don't know, what's your sort of feeling on I suppose the question that I've got is this does this replace you know um security consultants? Like, how does this how do you think this sits in the organization?
I think it gives a baseline, like we said. It's a good indication of something that's a configuration. Um, you still will need to do pen testing, because that's really against your app, your code as well. It's not going to look. It's not going to dive into the code per se. It's more around the PaaS services or the VMs that are hosting those applications. So, and potentially, whilst small medium companies might have small IT departments, they might not be able to manage this. They might just need someone to come in and just do a monthly check or a yearly check to make sure that, or on app launch kind of thing, just to help make sure it's at the best security standard they can.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the great benefits of this is because of the cost of it. It's a really easy conversation with a client because there's kind of no reason not to enable it, right? Because if we look at if I go to pricing for servers, like let's say you had a virtual machine, it costs $15 per month per server, right? And I think that is you know um, and that so just tacking that on to your virtual machine cost, you know, is it really depends on what virtual machine you've got running, right? Because if you've got a really cheap virtual machine, then well, it's probably not a production sort of ready machine. But it just kind of seems like a bit of a no brainer, really, and it saves my clients a lot of money because instead of me having to go and root out those security issues and try and hunt and find some of them to get to that baseline, um, I've got a report in front of me which gives me my actionable steps straight away. Um, and it sort of ranks it in this is the quickest, easiest wins, so it's kind of simplified that whole process of that first engagement, right?
Yeah, I was just about to say, $15, um, is what, how long of someone's time in our world, an hour, in some, well, less than an hour kind of thing, just to put it on for the whole month, just to help, get, like you said, get you straight to the point. These things are the things I need to definitely do or potentially do. Um, and then, all the other security changes about the code, etc., that you look at,
Yeah,
that kind of thing. So,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, I absolutely, I really like Security Center. It's I mean, there's loads of things I love about Azure. That's why we do an Azure podcast, obviously. But like Security Center, I think is one of those like no brainer. Let's just enable it. Sort of, I always include it if I, if a client's asking me, okay, I want to move, this virtual machine into Azure, and it's not a candidate to move to, a PaaS solution, then this makes a huge amount of sense, and it's like, like we've just discussed, it's, you know, it can save a lot of time, and I think it really does help those, because companies that are big, that have teams of people, that it's their dedicated job to to do this, right? Like if you've got a large IT team that is lucky enough to have, the correct amount of time to do all of this and have the ops of it. um but imagine if you're like a smaller, let's say you're like a micro or a small company where you have got some sort of workload, running in, Azure, or maybe that's on a different platform. This is a differentiator, than just buying a virtual machine from, like, one of the big sort of generic hosting providers, right? Because even though it might be slightly more expensive per month, it's like, well, we can have the security advisor running 24/7 that's monitoring what we're doing. And even if, we don't apply all the security rules and everything that it brings up, because maybe they don't have the budget to do that, right? Because you could be chasing for days and days, fixing stuff. It just shows us what we need to attack in the quickest order.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it worth just quickly going around its sort of roadmap, kind of where it started, and quickly how it's like developed? Um,
Yeah, do you want to take us through that?
yeah, so from what I can remember, it started off with virtual machines, as obviously that was the main thing that started in Azure, and it's kind of moved on to app services. But the new things it's been doing is getting into the databases technology. So, SQL obviously being its first one because it's Microsoft. But it's starting, at the moment they've got public previews for MySQL and Postgres SQL.
Yeah, that's
Um,
and that's it, and that's where you really, you know, databases are obviously an absolute, it's like the heart of any organization, right? The actual data, that's where you really, I mean, everything has to be secure, obviously, right? But a misconfiguration at the database level, like, is could just be absolutely catastrophic, and in terms of a security incident, right? Um, so yeah, so having this now looking like you just said, yes, it's fully supported on Azure SQL, but even for them to, and I think this is the general theme of, the new Microsoft, as I call it, is, opening up and supporting all of these different platforms, so they can say, okay, it doesn't matter if if your application isn't Windows, and let's say you're running Moodle, right, for your VLE. You can still, Moodle isn't a good candidate for pass. It's, the amount of the amount of files and everything like that. So it is a virtual machine solution, right? It 100%. So now I can be an open source PHP and Linux, application, and I can still get, security center coverage for my Linux box, and now potentially, my MySQL, my MySQL databases.
yeah,
It's just,
absolutely.
that's valuable, right? That's
Yeah,
really valuable.
yeah, and they've also got Azure Security Center for IoT devices
Okay,
now as well, so you can check that the security of those
nice.
are at a level.
Is there anything they won't check? I mean, like, it's just, if you've got it, we'll check it. And I just, yeah,
This is just
absolutely
this yeah, this is just showing, the amount of energy and effort they're putting into their security
correct. Yeah,
products.
yeah. And I mean, I know you sort of live in that world, so you and me obviously hear about, this, obviously me through you, the security, roadmaps and everything. But I think it just reinforces the fact that all of Microsoft's offerings are always very comprehensive across the board, not in terms of just like raw speed or functionality or price, but it's about designing the best product for the customer, right? In terms of, for businesses, right? Because, businesses do care. There is a legitimate reason to care about security, right? In our new, you know, GDPR enforced world, and all of that sort of stuff, right? These are the sorts of checks and things, that companies want to see. Yeah,
Yeah, and just going about the development that Microsoft do, they don't quite a lot of it isn't just plucked out the air. Someone at Microsoft's thought it's a good idea. A
yeah,
lot of it does come from the from businesses, from the community.
yeah.
They've got all their user voices around. Um, Sometimes takes a
Oh
little while
God,
to get
Alan,
some of
don't
it.
talk about user voices.
Private
We can't
channels.
talk.
Uh, um,
Oh,
but
private
it
channels.
they did come in the end. Obviously, there's things with that, but a lot of it comes from that. And when they go through the testing, yes, all of it's done in house first. But when
Yeah,
they go through their 3-stage sort of release, from private preview, there's customers out there that have been asking for it. They test it with them, and they have they do have their feedback does feed into it.
yeah, for
you know.
sure. Yeah,
And then when
yeah,
public preview comes here, it's more almost, the product's almost there, but there's always tweaks. And,
yeah,
even when it goes, generally available GA,
yeah,
there's always normally a change.
yeah.
So
No. And another part of it for me is automation support. So Security Center has the ability to report like security incidents, and also recommend new recommendations in straight into Logic Apps. There's a connector straight there, so you can then automate your, if you want to post about it inside of a team channel, you can do that, and then you could do whatever you want with that data, because obviously Logic Apps has connectors for so many different systems, and
yes, I guess one of them would be to post it into your ticketing system. So, an
yep,
incident or instance logged, and then the security team or the devs can go and fix it, or go and look at it
correct.
at least.
Yeah, and that's massively proactive, isn't it? That's not waiting till the end of the month to, to do a review and then potentially, find it or not find it. That is, actionable. The discovery is there instantly, isn't it, for the teams? So yeah, to get started, I mean, my recommendation would be to. I'm going to put this in the show notes as well. Inside of Security Center, there is a community menu item that has got some how-to guides and some videos, and also there is a Security Center community on GitHub, and there is some really good documentation on Microsoft Docs around Security Center. So yeah, definitely worth, if you're not using it, and this sort of comes under your remit, definitely worth having a look at, because um, it's not just it's more than just a basic sort of subscription checker, or network security checker. It will actually go and check your actual resources.
Yeah, just turn on the free tier initially and see what you
Yeah,
see,
exactly. Yeah,
and
yeah,
then go
exactly.
from there.
Yeah,
So,
cool. I think that sort of wraps up from me about Security Center. Is there anything else you want to add, Al?
no, I mean, I briefly talked about the Sentinel plugin, but that's that pushes all the logs into Sentinel, so you can keep them for the X amount of time you want from
Yeah,
activity.
yeah.
And they've got a workbook in there, like I said before, where you can basically see the compliance in one place. So if you've got multiple subscriptions, or you've got people living in Sentinel, you can keep them there rather than them having to move into another
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
portal, I guess, or
Yeah, for
blade.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, yeah, and like all roads lead to Sentinel, don't they? So, and that's the same. That's the same here. So, yeah. Okay. Should we do some news?
yep, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, last time it was pretty much Al's stuff, and but now I sort of dropped the ball, and now it's pretty much a load of it. Well, I think all of it's pretty much me, to be fair. Right, Data Flex and Data Flex Pro, Alan.
Yeah, this is.
Data Flex. What is Data Flex, Alan?
I'm not too sure. I know that. I know that Dataflex Pro was a rename from Common Data Services.
Yeah. So we've obviously had Common Data Service, which is what the Power Platform is built upon. So it's a sort of a massive database for your data. It can sort of talk into all these different Power Platform products, and you can store. I assume like exabytes worth of data in it, right? I don't know the exact limits, but like, huge amounts of data. And the licensing model for that was, I dare say, complicated. It's not complicated, is it? Al? It's just it could be expensive, right? Across the whole, across the whole organization. So
Yeah.
one thing that they've now done is they've now got so they've renamed the common data service into DataFlex Pro, and now we have this standard DataFlex. I don't know where they came up with the name. It sounds pretty cool, actually. Flexible data kind of makes sense because it is, a flexible data storage mechanism. So now DataFlex is only available. Oh, it's called DataFlex for Teams. So it's literally like having a mini version of the common data service just for a team inside of Teams. Is that right? That's right. I think I've said it right because it's Teams within. So if you imagine a specific team inside of Teams, they can now have their own DataFlex storage instead of having to put their data into the um, common data service.
All right. So it's kind of permissioning based on the team access, kind of.
Yes, correct. So you don't have these single environments. There's like an individual environment for each team inside of Teams. So let's just talk about what you can sort of achieve with that. Now you can create Canvas Power Apps directly within inside the team. So you can actually use the Power Apps, sort of designer to build your Power Apps directly in those teams. And then also you can do automations inside of there. So using Power Automate as well directly from within Teams. So it's a bit bizarre. I'm looking at some screenshots now. Obviously, nobody else can see it because we're on a podcast, but I can see people building like Power Virtual Agents inside of Teams, and it just seems a bit crazy. It's like they've just taken this whole product
will
and
that
shoved
be
it in
like
Teams.
approvals and things like that can be done
Yeah,
just for that within that team at least? Nice.
correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the security is also set on a per team basis, and there's no global access, across your team's environment. So you can be safe in the knowledge that, if you've got HR only apps, then HR can build them sort of quotes in secret inside of their teams. And you can have user roles inside of there and all of that sort of stuff. So basically, the idea is that this is an app for one single business unit, not multiple business units across the organization. There are basically the main difference between them is that there's no sharing, right? There is other stuff like you can't audit. There's no hierarchical security, and there's no field level security either. So that's something to take into account.
Okay. Yeah.
And the main thing is you can't share it. It's inside of one team. Obviously, limitations are, that data lives inside of that team. Again, no data sharing. And also, if a premium connector is used, then the Power App will require at least a per app per user Power App license for all the members of the team, including guest members.
All right. Okay.
So
So we
that's
still need that. So I was going to ask you about the premium connectors.
correct. Yeah. So you still need licensing for those premium connectors, and also including guest members as well, which is interesting. And obviously, we have limits to the amount of people that we can put in a standard team, right? I mean, I believe it's 10,000 or something like that. So it's pretty ridiculous. But
Yeah, I don't know if that got increased recently,
yeah, I can't remember.
or if that's
Something like that.
if that is the increase.
Yeah, and also DataFlex storage is limited to 2 GB. So yeah, so if your data storage requirements are larger than that, then yeah.
So what happens then if you hit those limits, or you build an app and you need to oh, okay, this is good to go. Actually, need to add some more teams into it. How
To
do
be honest with
I?
you, I'm not 100% sure. I believe I read that you can migrate them,
Okay.
but I'm not 100% sure on that. I'd need to go and have a look at the documentation a bit closer because this isn't something that I've even had a chance to look at yet, to be fair. But I'm because the licensing for premium connectors, which is always the problem with the common data service, right?
Yeah, I
Like
guess.
that's always the
Yeah,
sticking point. That's still there, right? So I
yeah.
I'm not
I
100%
guess.
sure why you'd pick this, to be fair.
Well, I wonder if the use of um, data flex, aka common data service, um,
Yeah,
not got used to that yet.
yeah,
To use the common data service on the Power Platform, it's a premium connector, as far as I'm aware,
yeah,
for most parts. So this might allow you to use the data flex without having a premium license
yeah,
within Teams.
yeah,
But then if you're using other premium connectors, that might kind of maybe doesn't make sense. Apart from
yeah,
obviously segregation of the data um,
yeah.
to those
And
teams.
I think as well, I suppose I could see it in a scenario where, let's say you had a HR app or, a flow or whatever it was, and then you wanted to be able to build, but in like a secure environment, but you didn't want anybody to be able to access that except for that HR team, right? Um, that could be good because it's literally limited to that team, so it's not like all of the, you know,
Yeah, I
or
guess.
if you had just one massive environment and database for your whole organization, then anybody that's got access to that could see any of that data, right?
Yeah,
Well, not necessarily because
yeah.
we've got access control, so I suppose that isn't necessarily an issue.
Well,
Um,
what I was just about to say was that you said that you can't share it out apart from within that team. Obviously, if someone in HR who built the app decided to share it with someone outside accidentally, or I'm putting my security hat on here, but maliciously, disgruntled employee to give access to the HR system,
yeah,
then they could, because they're the app owner or they've got those permissions based on them having those permissions, of course. Um,
yeah.
but within this Teams app or within the team, depending on who's the team owner, restricts that ability to do that, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that is and I suppose you don't have the common data service costs, right? Um, to store objects in common data service. So I suppose you get 2 gig for free, basically, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, if you wasn't using premium connectors and you were just building a HR app that sent emails or did stuff within the Office 365 or non premium connectors, you know, it would be it wouldn't cost you anything. It's just when you hit that premium connector part, then it becomes kind of do you don't you scenario.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's just going to be interesting to see. It's something that's pretty new. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at it. I obviously want to get my hands on it and have a play with it and make sure, see what we can do with it and what the sort of tangible benefits are, for our clients. Um, so next one I've got on my list is the Power BI compliance report for Intune. I did not have a, I did have no idea that Intune had a data warehouse until I read about this. So yeah, Al, thanks for letting me know that.
It's
But
it's
basic, but basically, it allows you to embed a compliance report straight into Power BI from Intune.
Yeah, so it's the data warehouse has been there, but it needed improving, I think. So I think this latest release is definitely a lot better.
Yeah,
As again, Microsoft put in lots of effort into the um, endpoint manager, as
yeah,
it's called now. So,
yeah.
um, but yeah, building that helps people without
But I,
admin access see that compliance with their devices, etc.
Yeah, and I just like the fact that Microsoft release, these compliance dashboards that you can just bolt in and use, right? So that you don't have to go through the rigmarole of like configuring it yourself and working out how to display the data. right? That Microsoft have just gone, here's a Power BI app, um, have at it, sort of thing. Like that to me is a real good value add. Because it's like, hey, do you want to surface all your Intune compliance data? Yeah, cool. Here's a Power BI, dashboard for that. So yeah, really good. Um, Next one on Power BI as well. Quite a lot of Power BI and Common Data Service today. Apologies. There's a React component for Power BI. So if you are a React developer out there, there is now a React component to embed a Power BI um, dashboard directly into a React application. So this is nice as well because it's got lifecycle events. So you can say it fire an event once the Power BI is fully loaded, right? And all of that. So let's say you wanted to show your own sort of custom loading screen because Power BI just sort of sits there and whatever whilst it's loading, then you could be alerted to when it's actually ready for the user to interact with. So yeah, really good little connector that loads of people have been asking for a long time.
That's
Um,
good.
yeah, I mean, it's great because that means that you can embed Power BI dashboards, in other
I,
applications.
I thought you was going to say that it was the other way around, that you
Yeah, I
could put
know. So did
React
I. When I
into
yeah, I know.
Power BI,
Yeah. That's
because you can do you can embed Power Apps into there,
yeah,
so you can depending on what data you select,
yeah,
hits that
correct.
Power App and you can do stuff with it.
Yeah,
But
so yeah, that's. I mean, what I'm really waiting for is Blazor and WASM support for Power Apps and Power BI, but we're waiting for that to happen anyway. I think there is a user voice out there, so chop chop. Right, that could be available. I haven't actually been checking on that for a while. And the last one is Windows Virtual Desktop capabilities. Um, so in April, Microsoft released some extra functionality for um, Windows Virtual Desktop. Basically, there's a better Azure portal integration because I think you were telling me it was to um, bring these services up, you had to use a lot of PowerShell before.
yeah, I think there's quite a bit of PowerShell where you had to set up the tenant for it and things like that. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really good. And also, there is an audio and video redirect for Microsoft Teams. So I believe this is where you accept a Teams call with inside the remote desktop, and then it can use the local Teams to actually do the call, so it's good quality. I think
yep,
that's what they're talking about
yep,
there. Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just an agent that in effect pairs up with your virtual machine.
Yeah.
So it authenticates when you log in. It authenticates your agent locally into
Yes.
Teams at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly like you said. When you get a Teams call, it tells the agent to do all the audio when it connects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give Windows Virtual Desktop a try actually, because it seems. Can you do it just on a single sort of, or does it have to be a more enterprise
No,
integration? Do you know, or can you
no.
just spin up
I
one?
think so. From what I remember, because we're looking at it now in my current role, but we're from what I can remember, the service itself is sort of free to run,
Okay,
but it's the servers behind it, all the Windows 10 VDIs, etc.
right.
That obviously
Okay.
cost to have them spun up, but um,
Do they have a different sort of billing model then? Because I assume this is for normal sort of people to
no,
run
it's
into their
just
thin client desktops, right?
no, I think it's just you can only so what you can do with Windows 10 in Azure, you can do multi-user mode. So it's like a uh, RDS server equivalent, multi-session, but it's Windows 10. So you don't have to worry
Oh,
about,
right.
the
Okay.
difference with, server 2012, 2016, etc., being different to, a standard desktop. So it's doing that. So you can have a, high-powered machine in Azure, Windows 10 that can, host 10 users at the same time. I mean, maybe not in your world because of all your dev apps, but standard Office, things like that. People who use, an example is someone who uses a Mac that wants to use the some of the Visio or Power BI desktop because there isn't a client for it. That kind of
Yeah.
stuff you can do that, so you can just enhance people's experience.
Yeah. No, I haven't even ever considered it. It's interesting as well because the pricing of it is done by usage hours per month as well. So I've
Yeah.
just done just done a comparison, a cost comparison. So the example workload is a graphics workstation, right?
Hmm.
100 users, yeah. Engineers and graphic designers with 3D modeling, simulations, and CAD workloads. Users spending 5 to 6 hours a day requiring workstation capability. So 12 virtual CPUs and 112 gig of RAM. I assume that's shared between them, right?
Yeah, that will be the machine itself, won't it? The
But that's
instance.
saying number of users. So do they get one each? Yeah, it must be
No.
because it's saying here the next example is Microsoft Office. It's personal desktop examples. There you go. Yeah, so it is a personal desktop, and it says Microsoft Office, 1,000 users, and then users work 8 to 10 hours a day, and they get 2 virtual CPUs and 4 gig of RAM each. Right. So
Oh,
if I
okay.
click West Europe pricing estimate, dun 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 dun, dun, dun. Once this loads, sorry, my 350 megabit internet is rocketing along today. So it's saying here that to have 1,000 users, you doing 8 to 10 hours a day on B2S instances would be $36,000 a month, which
I
is
mean, yeah. I mean,
nothing.
if you, yeah. I mean, if you
It's
think if you gave
$36 a month. It's like one what is it, 1.2, $1.1 a day?
well, I was just
And
thinking if you think about the upfront cost of a laptop or a desktop.
but I suppose what do they connect with? They still got to connect with a laptop, haven't they?
Yeah, but in remote working world, we can use their own machines because you're not worried about the security of that per
Oh
se
yeah,
because you're
BYOD,
remoting
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I
and
never really because me and you had talked about so for me, Visual Studio Online, right, and
mm,
having this, I might actually consider looking at that and seeing, if I could run my development machine
but
in the
the other thing
cloud.
just to mention is that you don't have to. As far as I'm aware, I have to double check this again, but um, you can just run applications off those servers. So, say you're just using Visual Studio Code, you can have it as an app in the portal, and it will just launch Visual Studio Code on your. It will just look like a window on your machine.
So it's like a Citrix, like
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
okay,
Microsoft did that anyway with RDS.
yeah,
You
yeah,
have
for
do
sure,
those
yeah,
apps,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, you can do that as well. So instead of you having the full, seeing the whole thing, you can just use your machine and have an app that looks like it's there, but it's actually running remotely.
Yeah, it's just I didn't even think it'd be interesting to see how performant because they're saying that's for graphics workstations. It'd be just interesting to see how performant the remote desktop software is, right? Um, because obviously we've now got low latency technologies like Parsec and Rainway and stuff like that. It would just be interesting to see what the latencies are and the
Mm.
bandwidth you can get out of that. Anyway, wow, yeah. So that's obviously and this is the thing about this podcast. We talk about stuff that like we're always learning as well. I think that's another thing just to mention as well. Like there is a lot. Our podcast is Azure, focused, but there is a lot out there, and we are constantly learning, aren't we? Al? There's no way to learn it all and to be a master of it.
No, there's a lot. There's probably a lot we don't touch in our day-to-day roles, but we kind of hear about, but never ever touch.
Yeah, exactly. Or we use it for our own personal, so like for my development environments, like having a remote remote machine to be able to do that would be, very good for me as I jump between different machines. So yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty much it then. What have we been going? I think we've been going about an hour now, haven't we? So
Have we?
yeah, yeah. So even though when we started this, we were looking through our talking points and we thought, oh, I don't know if there's going to be enough in there, but yeah, it did. We had quite a lot of news this time. So yeah, that's really good. Let me just close this document a second. Our next episode is going to be about zero trust. Which I assume Alan is going to give us a good overview of zero trust. Yeah,
Yep,
that's going to be our next
definitely.
episode. So hopefully we'll be back in a couple of weeks. We can see from analytics that more people are watching. So thank you for watching,
or listening.
listening.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I apologize. YouTube mode. So yeah, we can see that you're listening. We have our websites now up and running. Is that correct, Alan? Did
Yeah, I
we get it?
believe so.
Oh, should we do a shout out? Let me just have a quick look. It's bad that I can't remember the URL. It took us a while to find it. So our podcast website is letstalkpodcast.co.uk. And on there, you can stream and listen to any of the podcast episodes. And also, you can learn a little bit about us and get in contact with us. So, if you've got any feedback, please do get in contact with us, because we only know if we're annoying people or people really like this podcast by you getting in touch with us. So, yeah, you can find our contact details and our social media details on our website. So that's pretty much it from me.
Yeah. So yeah, any feedback, like Sam said, and any suggestions about some of the episodes as well, because
Yes.
we've got a couple sort of lined up, I think, haven't we? We've obviously got Zero Trust next time.
Yeah.
We might have another one. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, any suggestions? We can see if we can
Yeah.
get on
Accommodate that.
that. But
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for
Sure.
listening.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.
All right. See ya.